Thank you. Thank you very much for giving us your time today. Africa, what got you to set up this organization? How did you get into it?
Okay. Well, thank you for having me on your program. And yeah, so Afruca, we've been going now for almost 23 years. And I started the charity in 2001. And I started because at that time we had lots of children coming from different parts of Africa. And there was always news items about children being abused, being killed, like Victoria Klimbia was, or Damilola Taylor, and there were a number of children around that time. And I think I was primarily motivated because I just couldn't understand how somebody can kill a child in their care. And Victoria Klimbi's case really affected me at that time because she was about the same age as my daughter. And so I wanted to do something to help. And to be honest with you, I wasn't going to set up a charity that will still be in existence 23 years later. I just wanted to do something in my spare time, to get people together, to talk about how we can protect our children, some tips around parenting. That's what I wanted to do in my spare time. And we started to do that. And then some people said, "Well, Debbie, we can't just be talking about this on the internet. We should actually do something concrete." So we organized a conference in January 2002. And that was just the launching pad for the charity, because after that conference, I recognized that there was actually a huge gap. So I wasn't aware of the gap. I just wanted to do something, but the conference made me realize that actually there was a gap in relation to having a platform for the protection of African children in the UK. And so we registered a charity, and then the company and the charity, and essentially we're still here. All right. So the aim is still the same in relation to the protection of children.
Wow.
From harm and abuse.
Yeah. So you just these two incidents of two children who have been abused.
Yes, a number of children. Yeah. There was another young boy called. The issues were very similar. That they just newly arrived in the country.
And that inspired you to
yeah
create what you've created today.
Yeah.
And how was it? Because coming from an African background, how was it for you to take that step in terms of the support from the community? Because that's not really something that from, within the community, we don't really pay much attention to. We do work here in community, but from a community perspective, you setting up something where you're addressing these issues, again, going into children protection and our own heritage in terms of discipline and stuff like that. How was it perceived from people?
It wasn't easy. I have to tell you that it wasn't easy. So, of course, once we started, new issues started to come to the fore, like trafficking, like female genital mutilation. I never heard of female genital mutilation until I started Afruca. I didn't even know what it meant, right? So, when I read up about it, I'm like, people do that? And I was even more horrified to find out that it happens in Nigeria. Because I'm like, I grew up in Nigeria. I never heard of it. I even went to an all-girls secondary school, right? So the issue now is, how do we reach out into the community? And to be honest with you, I think it was 50-50. There were people who right from the outset really bought into the agenda that, look, we need to be doing more. Because, I went to my friend's house yesterday. Do you know that they had a house girl in the house here in London? Or, my friend's children, they're in foster care. So there were lots of issues. So lots of people bought into it.
Yeah.
At the same time, there were people who I felt did not understand the mission. They thought it was trying to portray a negative image of Africans. And to be honest with you, we used to got people calling our office to abuse us.
Wow.
In my early days of Afruca, because they're like, why are you washing our dirty linen in public? Well, yeah, but children are being abused here, and we have to do something about it. So if that means that your dirty linen had been washed in public, so be it. So we faced all those barriers, but at the same time there was a lot of encouragement and support. And I can say that even though it's been 23 years, I still remember some people who were supportive of Afruca in those very, very early days, who are still in support of Afruca even up till now.
Yeah.
So, it's been a long road, but certainly, there have been people who have been with
There's
us since
been,
day one. Yeah.
yeah, that's good. Prior to setting up, creating this charity, what was it that you did?
Yeah, I was a civil servant.
Oh, okay, that's completely
So when
different.
I graduated from university in Nigeria, and I was born in the UK, but I grew up in Nigeria. So I returned to the UK in 1990. I went straight into the civil service, and I worked in the civil service, different government department. I worked in the Department for the Environment. I worked at the Cabinet Office, and then I worked at Department of Trade and Industry. And I was there when I set up Afruca, and I was working in small business policy. So, and for me, the issue is how are you going to jump from small business policy to working in the charity sector? But actually, there were lots of similarities in relation to how to build a successful business, and a charity is a business. And so, right from the outset, it really helped me because right from the outset, my aim was to make Afruca a successful charity. Of course, it's one thing to aim, and the reality can be different because there's so many external circumstances. But essentially, I had a background from being a civil servant for many years before setting up the charity.
So you would say the business background kind of helped as well.
Yeah.
Just yeah, working
Yeah, the working as a civil
as civil
servant
servant
initially,
initially,
but
and
also working in my last
yeah,
policy job in small business policy
yeah,
really helped me
yeah.
in relation to the direction I wanted to take the charity.
That's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you share some of the success stories of the when it comes to your work in terms of safeguarding children and as well as the challenges that you faced during the 23 years?
Okay. I mean, the success story is because we've been going for 23 years. What could be a success story 10 years ago? Looking back now, I can say, okay, was it really a success? Because, so I can give you an example. An example I can give is work around the branding of children as witches. It's a huge problem. It was a huge problem. And a number of children actually were killed. Victoria Klimbie, Judah Kakpa, there were a number of children were killed. And so about 10 years ago, we were actually doing a lot of work around that. The government was really interested. We were able to push the government to act, to set up a national working group, to put together a national action plan to tackle the subject. And there was a lot of progress made. But that's all gone. So our sources 10 years ago. So in terms of this particular work, I can say, well, where's all that gone? Because the present government is not really interested in issues like that. And there hasn't been any major development in terms of policy around this issue. But children are still being branded as witches. Children are still being abused. So we know that from our casework here at Afruca in terms of child protection work. So what was the success 10 years ago? It might not necessarily be success for us this year, which I guess it's a shame because a lot of us, the success that we will claim will be dependent on the work of the government. Right? Like we were talking about earlier. If the government is not really interested in addressing specific issues, then you can contribute as much as you like. You can have some successes here and there, but you wouldn't be able to make any major impact because ultimately the government is not really interested or is not willing or able to act to address those issues.
So I think what I hear you saying is, so once upon a time, there was you had loads of successful stories because you got the support from the government to tackle these issues, and you could see the effects of the funding, the right support and resources. You were given the resources to be able to, maybe provide training or address the issues.
Yeah.
However, the current government lack of interest or funding, so to speak, is now it's almost like taking you back, or should I say the society back.
Taking the society back, yeah.
10 years, a couple of years
absolutely
back. So we are still having a high number of these safeguarding issues relating to some of the stuff that you've mentioned.
Absolutely. Because if you look at, another example I can give is trafficking, human trafficking or child trafficking. Again, at some point, we're doing lots of work in communities like Nigerian community around domestic servitude. We ran lots of campaign. We got funding from the Home Office to do that. And the government was really interested in working in specific communities, so targeted intervention in specific communities. And so if you asked me this question in 2017, I would have said to you, oh yeah, we have this, amazing success story to share. That was 2017. Since then, there's been lots of new ways people are being trafficked into the UK. There are lots of people who are being trafficked into the UK.
Can you give example?
For labor exploitation, for example. Okay. Because the government has this new work visa schemes to attract people to come and work into the UK. For example, care work. For example, agriculture, even teaching, nursing, doctors, right? But there's a lot of exploitation going on. And the government is aware that there are people being exploited because people want to come to work in the UK, but they need a sponsor. And so the government has these guidelines in terms of what the sponsor should be doing.
Yeah.
But then, the government is saying that you pay me £10,000 or £20,000 or whatever amount of money. And so people are being exploited in that way. And they come to the UK and they even find that there's no work anyway. Nothing is being done around that. So that's a new form of trafficking that we were not seeing in 2017. Right. So if you ask me the question in 2017, I'll say, yeah, we've made very, very good inroad into tackling trafficking. Right. Because lots of people were also being prosecuted around that time. Now there's no prosecution. We're not seeing people being prosecuted for trafficking and exploiting people, unlike before. So the success story then for Afruca is, I think, largely dependent on the work of the government. It doesn't mean that we're not doing anything. We're still acting. We're still working with families. We're still supporting communities. But I guess there's a difference between success on a lower level and a higher level. Right? If we're working in communities and the government is also intervening, doing its own part, then this success story will look very different to what the current situation is.
So you talked about the lack of government support, setting back all the work that you've done a few years back. It's almost like now, people are innovative in the way, they go about trafficking people, or the whole system is changed. And so how does Africa sustain itself? And where do you get your support now? In terms of, because these are still a problem in society, in our communities, in terms of safeguarding with children, protecting children. Like you mentioned, human trafficking. So where do you get that support, and how do you manage that?
Oh, we still have very good support from private trusts and foundations. We do have some government grants. So I'm not saying that there's no government funding. There is government funding, but there's a difference between when you're tackling a particular issue at the grassroots level, but there's no corresponding action on the part of government to, I guess, heighten
and provide that extra support.
Exactly, at the policy level.
At the policy level.
That really is the gap I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So we still continue to do the work. At Afruca, we're still working in communities to tackle trafficking. So just before COVID, we set up the UK BME anti-slavery network called BASNet. And so the idea is to say, look, there are lots of trafficking issues in different communities, Black communities or Black and ethnic communities. And we want to not just be the only charity across the table where policy is being made.
Yeah.
We want other organizations to be involved. So we set up BASNet, and the idea really is to say, oh, look, you're working in Ugandan communities, and Ugandans are being trafficked into the UK. There's no Ugandan organization really doing anything about it. So, why don't you come and join us in BASNet and really understand the landscape? With that, you can now decide how you want to intervene in your community. So we have BASNet doing that. We run residential training programs for the different organizations who are members. We do all sort of capacity building. We give them funds from the money we got, funds to run an advocacy event in their own community. So we do lots of different things in that way. So we're still working on trafficking. So that's not in doubt. And also as part of our casework, we still get referrals, children who have been trafficked, adults who have been trafficked, young people who have been trafficked, domestic slavery, sexual exploitation, labor exploitation. So all those issues are still there.
Wow.
We're still addressing them obviously within the means that we have.
That you have.
But I wish that government rhetoric around illegal immigration does not actually discriminate between illegal migrants and victims of trafficking.
So do you think the government's rhetoric when it comes to immigration, because it's a big thing now, I mean, yes, running up to election, and that's all everyone is, it's like the new campaign slogan. So that's having an impact in human trafficking.
Of course, it is a large impact, because a lot of people who have been trafficked have been brought into the UK illegally.
Yeah.
Either they've used someone else's passport, or they've not brought them on the passport. Whatever the case may be, a lot of people have been brought here illegally, but the government sees them as illegal migrants.
So, like for instance, the illegal immigrants that come through the boats, because that's another.
A lot of them
are being. We should. There are a number of them that are being forced. To.
A lot of them have no control. Absolutely. Because before, we never used to have the boats. Why? Because people used to come through the borders. But because the government has tightened, these different ways people are coming through the borders, then traffickers have found new ways of bringing people into the country. I can give you another example of that to make it a bit clearer. So a lot of people are being trafficked via the Mediterranean, via Libya, the Mediterranean Sea, to Europe. We never used to have that because people used to come through the airports, right? And in those days, we didn't have biometric passports. So I could use your passport 500 times to bring in different women. We used to see the cases at Afruca, like, the same trafficker. We could say, okay, the story you're telling me, I've heard the story before. So we're now working out, it's the same people bringing these people in using the same passport, right? So, that was the case. Now those avenues have been blocked. So people are now bringing people on the boats. Some of the people on the boats are from Sudan. They're from Eritrea. Of course, many of them are from Albania and other Eastern European countries. Well, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Sudan. These are countries that are actually facing some form of a conflict or another. There's a form of a problem there or another. So definitely, a lot of people are being brought in on the boats who have been trafficked or who are being trafficked into the UK.
So what do you think the government can do, given the fact, of what the government's not going to release much funds, but on a policy level, what would you like to see that would make a difference or support, the work that you guys are doing?
Well, it's what used to happen. The government needs to recognize that there are people who are being trafficked into the UK as victims for different types of exploitation. And the government needs to give them extra protection. The government needs to at least give them an opportunity to prove whether they've been trafficked or not. To be honest with you, if you do manage to find a good charity like Afruca to support you, you could go into the system. But not every person who's been trafficked, who's been able to escape or they've come out of it, have been able to find a good organization, because how would they know, right? So, because they don't know, they might even find themselves. There was a story of a young woman we were helping some years back, who she was trafficked and she was exploited in a hairdressing salon. Eventually, she ran away. And she saw this woman who she thought she could talk to, because she felt she was a Nigerian woman. And she was a Nigerian woman, so she got that right. Oh, okay, I will help you. This woman took her to her home and gradually just turned her into a domestic slave in the guise of helping her. So she was there for another couple of years, working with this woman, looking after her children, cleaning her house for nothing. Well, apart from the
Being fed.
the accommodation, yeah. So the point I'm trying to make is this: is firstly, we need to really understand that a lot of people are being trafficked and harmed. Firstly, secondly, we need to be able to make it easy for them that when they escape, they will get the right support. And in a way, I understand where the government is coming from, because even in Africa, we've seen it. Some people were not victims of trafficking. They will tell you they're victims of trafficking. But when you assess them, you can tell that they don't match all the criteria. All right, so their story doesn't gel. You can also say that, okay, well, a lot of victims of trafficking, they've been through so much trauma that the story will not gel at that first instance. It's possible, because they can't remember. Some of it, they've kind of like repressed the memory because it's too painful for them. And it's only after a number of years or a number of months that gradually they can start telling their story. So whatever the case may be, we should be able to help those people. But because of the rhetoric around migration and the people who are coming to take our jobs, or the people who are destroying our NHS, the government is not really looking at that side of things.
They're not vested anymore.
Exactly. And that really is a problem for many charities, victims of trafficking and others.
I mean, so this is from the diaspora perspective. Let's go back to Africa. I mean, majority of these migrants are from either North Africa or, so mostly African migrants. With regards to human trafficking, what can be done? I know Africa is not directly working with the governments in these countries, in the African countries, but as a charity who address, and when you see them when they come in, you see the problem, the challenges that they face. What would you like, or what do you think the African leaders can do, or maybe organizations or agencies like yourself that are focused on, stopping this illegal immigrants, or this whole traffic system from coming? What do you think the African leaders can do to help address this issue and to reduce the number?
People become victims of trafficking when the conditions in their home countries are not
good.
Yeah, they're not
extreme poverty.
Yeah. So we're talking about extreme poverty. We're talking about wars, and when we're talking about climate change, we're talking about conflict. All these are issues that push people into being trafficked. They become magnets for human traffickers. And so the answer then is very simple, that we need to be addressing poverty in different African countries. Some of the countries where there's a high number of people who are being trafficked are countries like Sudan, Nigeria, Eritrea. And we can understand why, because, for example, Nigeria has the highest level of poverty in the world. Sudan is at war, Ethiopia, Eritrea. Eritrea really is not at war. But there's a repressive government in Eritrea. that's pushing all the young people out because they don't want to be conscripted into joining the military. There's a lot of economic problems in Eritrea, so you can understand where people are coming from, what's pushing them, and so the answer really is simple. We just need to have the political will. Nigeria is not a poor country. Nigeria is extremely rich, but there's a massive amount of corruption in Nigeria. So the money that should be used to develop the country is being stolen by different people.
Individuals in
Yeah,
government.
so we need to tackle corruption in countries like Nigeria. Yeah, it's the same in countries like Kenya. So Kenya too, there's a lot of women and young women and young men who are going to countries like Dubai and Lebanon and others Middle East to work. They think they're going to work, but they end up, as part of the kafala system. So all the Middle Eastern countries, they have a visa scheme, just like the UK, for people who want to come and work. They call it kafala. Well, people say it's very akin to slavery, right? Where people go there and you are seen as a slave by your employer. You are seen as a slave by your employer. You become their property. You're not paid. There was a time there was something like a bomb blast in Lebanon. Well, the lots of Africans who became displaced and they couldn't even leave the country. Why? Because they didn't have their passports. Because the employer had taken their passports. Their houses had been bombed. So the people were just there. So if you go to your embassy to say, I'm Nigerian, they say, where's your evidence that you're Nigerian? There's no evidence that you're Nigerian because you don't have your passport, right? So I guess the point I'm trying to make is we have all these different visa schemes, the UK one, and then we have the Middle Eastern one that's really trapping people into modern slavery. So we call it modern slavery. Now we don't even use the term trafficking anymore. Modern slavery, where you are at the mercy of your employer.
It's interesting you say this because when I think of human trafficking, I'm thinking young female who are, as an example, one I believe is one of many types of human trafficking, who are being forced into travel against their will, or they've been promised some, prosperous life in another region or part of the world, and they obviously go there, and then it's a different thing. But when you explain this, where a state offers people a visa, there's a legal way of entry into the country and be able to have the rights of or the citizens of that country. But actually, it's not the case. So we also have people falling under a different kind of, as you say, modern day slavery now.
Yeah, people say it's state sanctioned modern slavery, where people are being trapped in slavery because of the
system of the government
that the government itself has put in place.
So would you say in this country, just, digress a little bit, is the government aware that the citizen, say for instance, the employer is taking the passport and it's legal?
Of course. I'm not going to say it's legal, but there's a lot of awareness because
so they are aware, but nothing is being done.
Nothing is being done.
Right.
So to be honest with you, I'm looking at this new system we have in the UK where people can come into work and what's been happening in countries like Saudi Arabia, the Emirates and, all those other countries in the Middle East. There's no difference. People are being trapped into exploitation by virtue of the visa that's brought them into the UK.
No, I would agree with you. We've had numerous stories of people who were promised through rogue agencies, agents, promising them when you come here, there's a 30K job waiting for you, and a lot of them sell the properties, the land, and quit their jobs.
Exactly.
And then they're coming to do there's even the menial job is not there, so they're trapped.
Yeah, and there's another side to it, which there are lots of doctors from countries like Nigeria
Yeah.
coming to the UK. And they've been sponsored by the NHS. You can read it in the newspaper. It's all
No,
out there.
I've seen some.
The people who have come, they've quit the medical jobs in countries like Nigeria, South Africa, but especially Nigeria. Nigeria, we have to talk about the other side of it. Nigeria is losing, on average, I don't know, maybe 4,000-5,000 doctors, I don't know, every 6 months or something. Right? It's a huge brain drain. So they come here, but their visa is saying that you're tied to your employer for the next 5 years. But in those 5 years, you can go through hell, right? Because you do all the night shifts, you're maybe not paid the right amount. Lots of issues,
Definitely,
that people are facing.
the pay is something, and I think that's been addressed.
Yeah.
The reason why there's this scheme for migrant workers is the rates that are being offered to them when they do the conversion and they come to the country. Whereas they wouldn't be able to offer that to
Exactly.
a UK citizen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, so that's why I said to you that we've achieved success in the past, but at this point, I can't even say that there's any success story because
So
we're seeing all these new forms of trafficking, and
it's just taking a different form.
Exactly.
And this time around, it looks as if it's been state excused. I don't know if that word makes any sense.
It's sanctioned by the state. Yeah, because
Right.
the government could have said, okay, fine, we're not really happy about how people who are coming to work in the UK to support us are being treated, so we're going to make these changes to the way the system works. Nothing like that. So as long as the government is not acting, we can only do so much as a small charity. And I really cannot say that it's an achievement because we're not going to be able to help as many people because of the constraints that have been put in place by the government.
Yeah. So so we talk about safeguarding and protecting African children. How is Africa involved in some of the policies around this issue?
Okay, thank you. Well, so safeguarding is obviously a big issue in the UK today. We have lots of children coming from different parts of the world with their families. So that also links into people coming to work from abroad. We're seeing lots of families who are coming to work and who are coming with their families and children, so who are coming with their children. And a lot of them, because they don't understand UK laws on child protection, they get themselves into trouble. We have lots and lots of families where their children have been beaten, physical chastisement.
As a result of discipline.
As a result of discipline. And of course, the children have gone to school, maybe they're crying, or maybe they've actually been asked, what happened to you? My mommy beat me. Anyway, so we see lots of those families at Afruca. We also see lots of families where a lot of these people who, like we talked about just earlier, they've come here, they think they're coming to work, there's no work for them. They still have to pay their agent. They have to, they owe money in Nigeria or Ghana or wherever. A lot of these people come, they cannot look after their children. They've brought their children, they cannot look after, they don't have the means. And they do not have recourse to public funds, so they cannot get benefits. Those children, to a very large degree, are also suffering from child neglect. So we had a case I think it was in Lincoln some months ago, where the parents left the baby in the house. I can't remember the story, so don't quote me, but none of the parents was around. One of them had gone to work, the other one had gone out somewhere. They left the baby sleeping on the bed. The baby woke up, and the baby maybe looked around. There was nobody there. The baby tried to climb out of the first floor window, and the baby fell down. The neighbors saw the baby and, called the ambulance. An ambulance came to carry this boy to the hospital. Right. So luckily, he didn't die. And of course, that's child neglect in this country. So we're seeing lots of families.
Anywhere, it should be anywhere.
Yeah, anywhere. We're seeing lots of families like that where they're not able to cope. They're taking out the anger on their children. There are lots of issues. And so, there's a lot of work going on with Afruca. Our priority is to see how we can help to educate parents who are newly arrived in the country about UK law and child protection. What is acceptable? What is not acceptable? What is child abuse? What are the categories of child abuse? And how can you bring up your children without beating them, especially that? Because parents say, okay, fine, you say I shouldn't beat them, then what shall I do? So we teach them alternatives. And that is actually a large part of our work at Afruca. Then we are seeing another category of children where they're involved in exploitation as children. So we have issues like county lines, child trafficking. And county lines affects a lot of Black children. Many of them are African children where the children are from a very poor background. We've explored some of the reasons why the families can be poor. The children want to help the family. They might not even necessarily want to help, but the people in the areas they live in, that can tell that this child is from a poor family. I can tell that this child has not eaten today.
They become a target.
They become a target of traffickers who start by buying them food and then giving them gifts and then asking them to run little errands. And before you know it, the child is sucked into trafficking. So sometimes you open the newspaper, or if you go on Twitter or Facebook, you see a child has gone missing. The loss of Black children going missing. We never used to have that in this country. Lots and lots of Black children going missing every single day. A lot of them are African children, Caribbean children, and they reappear 4 weeks, 5 weeks later because they've been used to go and move drugs or sell drugs or something to do with drugs in a different part of the country. That's county lines trafficking. So we've been doing a lot of work with Manchester City Council on this issue. And one is to inform the work that the council is doing, but secondly, we have different grants from Manchester City Council to tackle this issue in relation to young men and boys, to tackle the issue in relation to young women, and then the whole family. So we have 3 different projects we're currently running in Manchester, just to tackle this issue, support families. Because some families, if the young man now or the young woman now says, no, I don't want to be involved in this, well, the whole family is now targeted by the traffickers. So sometimes the family needs to be supported, to move away to a different part of the country. So we get involved in that. We help them, we advocate for them, different council agencies, housing, benefit, the schools, just to make sure that, we can resettle the family successfully and then move the young person into a different school, a different part of the area. And a lot of the time, when one child in the family has been targeted, the other children in the family are at risk.
Wow.
Yeah, so then we have to do work with those children as well to make sure they're not sucked into the same system. So it's a lot of work. Now, for that, I can say to you, we have huge success stories in Manchester because our work has been recognized by the government, and we just got some new funding from Manchester to expand the work. So I can see that, there's some success there.
So on this issue, the government is very much on board, obviously, with their policy supporting and also providing resources.
Because the children are seen as UK children. So the UK children, they are our children. So there's a lot of money being popped into youth violence.
I mean, it's understandable because, they are UK citizens, their parents hopefully are contributing to the economy. But yes, from a humanitarian point of view, I can see the UK government thinking, well, that's not an issue, send them back to wherever they come from. But it's good that the governments are helping, supporting in this. But from the community aspect, because you talked about, the family units, you do training and offer different kinds of support to educate all the parties, well, the young men and the women and the parents. What's your biggest challenge in engaging with them? Or is there any challenge?
I don't think there is. I mean, initially, of course, when you first start a new project, sometimes people are a bit reluctant because they don't know what your mission is.
So do you
But
get a lot of African parents actually
yeah,
engaging and
we
think,
have lots
yeah,
of African parents
okay,
engaging
that's
in
good.
Manchester because a lot of the families affected are African. You have lots of
I
African
mean, a
boys
lot of
and
the
girls.
knife crimes
A lot of the
again.
nice crimes, for example, I think there was a young man who was killed about 2 or 3 months ago in the summer. He was an African boy. Sometimes you see different African gangs, young men's gangs fighting each other. Right? So it's a big problem, and sometimes it's the the Portuguese and the West Africans. It's a mess.
When you think about these young people, creating this in an age where, the society is very much like a global village, and you and they're still able to create this massive divide between themselves.
Yeah.
What could be the root cause? What?
One of the things we're trying to do as part of our work is to really talk to the young people about identity. Because I think for many of the young people, it's an identity issue. It's also it's a testament to their own history. A lot of these young people have gone through a lot in their home environment where they grew up in violent homes. They grew up in homes where their parents are always fighting, where even they were abused, even though maybe they were never brought to the attention of the authorities. And so they have a lot of anger in them. And one way of, just demonstrating that anger is, through different issues with young people. So a lot of, I mean, some of the stories in relation to children who have, kind of like beaten up each other, or killed each other. It's a simple matter of he disrespected me. So respect means a lot to them. And so he disrespected me and he did this to me, did that to me. And then so you just, I think they could say the shaft him and then the group retaliates and then it's like an ongoing battle between them. So, issues around identity, issues around tackling, abuse and violence in the home are very key to addressing gang
So
violence
would
in
you
many of the countries.
say the family plays a key role, and I want to bring these down to what we've always heard. I don't have the data, but I know you have more information on this. When it comes to the family, a lot of this safeguarding issues and that you have with our young African, I mean, let's say our African children, does it stem from the a broken family?
I mean, I don't want to generalize, but we can track the movement. We know that a lot of families where there's a lot of poverty, families parented by single parents, especially single moms.
Single moms.
Not just single moms, but especially single moms.
Right.
And a lot of those children, especially if they're boys, must start to look for a father figure or a family outside the home, and they get into the wrong gangs. We also know that there's a lot of child abuse in many African families. We see that in our work at Afruca, and we know that a lot of these children end up in foster care. We also know from statistics that a lot of children who go to foster care never ever come out with good outcomes. They don't come out with good grades. They cannot go into jobs. They end up in the criminal justice system. And so right from that, initial stage where there is poverty and all those issues in the home, we can easily say, if there's no intervention for this child, this is the direction that child is going to go. Yeah, we see a lot of that. So a lot of our children are in the criminal justice system, and they keep going in and out, in and out, in and out, because of that initial problem that was not addressed,
Yeah.
i.e. poverty, i.e. violence in the home.
And then it becomes a
It
part
becomes
of their
yeah, exactly.
life.
And that's it. Yeah, and it becomes their story.
I mean, with the internet now, how does that impact the work that you do with regards to safeguarding?
There's online child abuse. During COVID, there were lots of stories about young girls who were being targeted online by traffickers. I mean, well, they were being groomed online, and exposing themselves online, not knowing that they think they have a boyfriend, and that the boyfriend is asking them to, okay, remove your top, okay, remove your bra, and and of course, these images are being mass produced and then distributed within the the pedophile network, if I can say that. And so the young people are unwittingly doing that. They're taking part in this without knowing the repercussions. So that's on one hand. On the other hand, we also know that a lot of young people were being recruited by traffickers online. There was a story in a newspaper, I can't remember which newspaper now, about a young boy who obviously during COVID there were no jobs. And they saw an advert on Instagram or Snapchat, one of those places young people go to, about a job where you could earn quick money. And he called them up. Before he knew it, they were outside to pick him up. And that was it. He disappeared for weeks.
Wow.
All right. But they've used him to go and sell drugs, And the other way they also use young people to sell drugs is that they're not necessarily on the streets. So you might not necessarily see them on the streets. The traffickers are very, very clever. All traffickers, whether they're Nigerian traffickers or African, they're very clever. It's a business model.
They're very organized.
They're very, very organized. So if they're trafficking a young person from here to, say, Manchester, the young person might not necessarily be selling drugs on the streets of Manchester. They might be in somebody's house because they've been able to find a drug addict and they're giving the person drugs. In exchange for giving them drugs, they're living in his house.
Yeah, he provided location.
They turn the house into like
the office.
The office where they do all the packing, the selling, everything. And it's called a cuckoo, like a cocoon, like a... where
the pod.
The pod, yeah. So it's a huge, massive issue in this country. So we see a lot of our children who are caught up in that, both male and female.
Wow.
Both male and female children. So we try, like I said, in Manchester, we're trying to expand that work to London. We started it in Manchester. We're now trying to expand it to London. And hopefully with some funding, we can do the same. I know other charities are doing it. We would also like to be involved in that for the simple reason that it is such a huge problem. And there is a lot of demand for this type of work just because of the vulnerability of many children and young people.
Yeah. Right. If there's anything that you'd like to say, obviously in terms of what Afruca does and, your team and how you guys have managed the challenges and deliver your work and
well, I mean, of course there are always challenges for a charity, for any business organization, but even more so for a charity working in the Black community. These are very, very difficult times for many charities. In the past few months, a lot of charities have actually closed down because they don't have the funds to do their work. And luckily for us at Afruca, we're still going. And I just pray that that can continue to be the same. But I think if in that sense, I have to really, really recognize that we have very good quality people in Afruca. We have a lot of dedicated people in our charity. And I feel that for that reason, that so this is our current success story now in terms of being able to have on board a lot of good quality people who are really working very hard to impact our community. And I think that's what every charity wants. It's one thing to set up a charity, but if you don't have good people around you, you will not be able to impact. I think we've made a lot of impact because of the quality of people that we have at Afruca.
The team that you have. That's good. Well done.
Thank you.
So how do people get to access your service?
Okay. Oh, well, there are many ways. We have lots of different services. So we have services for young people who are caught up in exploitation, both male and female in Manchester. We have services supporting their families who are going through difficulties. We have services for families in the child protection system. So we have lots of services, and the best way to reach us really is to go on our website, afruca.org. So I always say Afruca is, if you write Africa, you take out the I in Africa and you put a U in. That's afruca.org. And from there you can send us an email. We will get it, and we always respond to our emails. So any issue that you're dealing with, let us know. Please, can you help me with this? We will respond to you, and we'll match you with the right caseworker to support you at Africa.
Thank you for joining me on African Network.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.